Morning, everyone. How about if we start out with a little Catholic trivia? I'm not going to call on you, so you don't have to worry about that. How many people do we think were born without original sin? I said not raise your hand, but you're saying two? Okay, who do you think? Mary and Jesus. Well, you're right on those two, but there's another one, and it's not Adam and Eve. St. John the Baptist. He was conceived in original sin, but when Mary's voice reached him and he leaped for joy, he was filled with the Holy Spirit and was born without original sin. Take that to your next cocktail party. I had to argue with one of my previous pastors on that. I had found that in a Catholic encyclopedia, and he refused to believe it. I said, well, you can argue with the church if you want, but I'm not going to. This gospel passage that we're given today immediately follows Gabriel's message to Mary that she would conceive and bear a son, call him Emmanuel. Gabriel tells Mary that her cousin Elizabeth is in her 6th month. And I always liked Mary's response with this. She's excited, she's happy. And I think part of it is that she's happy because, the culture of the time, if you didn't have children, you were seen as cursed by God. So that Mary now is happy that Elizabeth's stigma is going to be gone because she's going to bear a child. And so Mary runs out in haste to go visit her cousin. And I like that Mary's not all about me, what about me and my condition? Look at me, I'm going to bear this Son of God. She's more concerned with other people. I was talking to a young lady today who had a child because I don't know that much about pregnancy and the months and I asked her, I said, can you tell me what it's like to be 6 months pregnant? And her response was, I stopped getting nauseous. Okay, well, that's good. Talked to somebody else then later, and they said, about 6 months, the baby's kicking, is pushing on your bladder, you're going to the bathroom all the time. Mary knows what's going to happen to Elizabeth. She knows that she's elderly, she's going to need help. And she rushes out to help her. And remember, this is about a 90-mile journey. There's brigands along the way, robbers along the way. Only way you could get there really was on foot or on donkey. There were no cars, no air conditioning. And yet Mary took that treacherous, long journey because of her compassion for others. She didn't make excuses. I think sometimes we make excuses when things seem a little bit difficult for us. We don't want to do something, and we need to take Mary's example and really just follow what God asks us to do, what he puts on our heart, and go for it. I was trying to think of what their conversations would have been like. They were excited for each other. They probably talked about how God is faithful in his promises. Probably talked about what their kids were going to grow up to be, what their future held in store for them. Things that most parents would talk about. I also think they talked about their faith a lot because they were both going through something that was miraculous. They were there to support one another. And I think that is really important. And then I started thinking about my own parents. Started thinking about my mom. I was born in 1959. My mother was 44 years old at the time that I was born. Back then, and still today, it's looked at as being too old to be pregnant. There are a lot of complications that could happen. And in fact, I heard the story that the doctor had suggested to my mother that she shouldn't go through with the pregnancy. And I could only imagine what this very Catholic woman was going through in her own life. the questions that were raised about having a child at her age, what the church says, what she felt was doing the right thing. So, of course, she went through with the pregnancy. I'm standing here. But it wasn't just her faith that got her through. It was the faith of her friends as well. Those people who supported her in her desire, who supported her in her faith, who were there to help her through the difficult times. I think too often we take our friendships for granted. We don't recognize how important they are. Are we grateful for the people God has put into our life? Are we grateful for the support they give us in those times of need, trial? Are we good friends to them? When something goes wrong, do we say, oh no, I got something else to do? Or do we drop everything we're doing to help one another? Looking at the life of Mary and Elizabeth, they needed one another. They needed to help one another, support one another by their prayers. Think of what happens very shortly after John the Baptist and Jesus' birth. Herod comes along and has the massacre of the innocents. They just had this miraculous message made known to them. And yet, now Herod's killing all the little babies. The tradition has it that John the Baptist was hid in a dry well on their parents' estate. Jesus, we know, fled to Egypt. How did they get through that without constantly reminding themselves of God's providence in their life? How good God was to them, that he didn't reject them, that he was always there for them. Are we having the same faith as they do, especially as we prepare through this Advent season? Lord, I trust that whatever I'm going through, even though I can't see the end result, I'm going to believe that you're there for me at all times, through all the difficulties I face. Blessed are you who believe that what was spoken to you by the Lord would be fulfilled. That message isn't just for Mary and Elizabeth. That message is for us too. Do we believe that what was spoken by the Lord, that he will be with us through all things, is going to be fulfilled? Do we hold on to that faith? Or do we let the pressures and circumstances of life steal that and rob us away from the grace of God? As we approach Christmas, let us recognize that God is Emmanuel, God with us. He is there through everything we're going through. And he's not going to go back on his promise to be with us through all things.